A common issue I have seen across 3,000 clients is self-deception. I often ask myself this question is, am I full of shit? And the reason why I like to ask myself that question is because of what I've seen over a 25-year career, 3,000 clients. I've seen that a lot of people do have areas or blind spots, whatever you want to call them, where they're kind of full of shit. In the sense that they would pass a lie detector test saying that they do this thing. But when you look at their actions, they don't. They don't do it at all, or they're definitely not as consistent as they think. One of the best examples is when people don't want to track their food and they say, I eat the same things every day. Not really. Now this is a person who, I've done diets where I've eaten literally the same food. I remember one time I did a diet where I lost 50 pounds in 8 weeks. And the only meal I had was ground turkey, marinara sauce, and brown rice. The reason why is I hate brown rice and I hate ground turkey. Therefore, I knew like, okay, if I was hungry enough to eat that, then I'm actually hungry. And since that was the only food I was allowing myself to have, literally every meal, every day for 8 weeks, very unhealthy, by the way. So definitely don't recommend this. But I knew that, okay, if that was the only food I was allowing myself to have, then I can't possibly overeat that because I would hate it. The second I don't actually need the nutrients, I'm probably not going to continue to eat. And it did work. So like I said, I lost 50 pounds in 8 weeks, which was pretty awesome. Now, that was really unhealthy, but that's an example of where you do literally eat the same things every day. Now, a little bit more of a realistic and human approach is the current diet that I'm working through right now. I'm eating to maintain enough to grow muscle, but I'm still wanting to lose body fat. So a little bit like a body recomp. So I'm fluctuating around with my timing of protein and carbs, and then my fats kind of stay consistent. But that means that some days I have meals where I'll have chicken breast and jasmine rice. Some days chicken breast and I'll actually mix cottage cheese with buffalo sauce in it. Sounds gross probably, but it actually tastes really good. But it's lower carbs than the rice. And then I also will play around with different cereals. Like right now I'm using a Chex, Honey Nut Chex cereal, which is a carb source. And then I just have cottage cheese by itself. I only have maybe a variety of like 5, 6, 7 foods. And I'm playing around with that because it allows me a little bit more variations for meal timing. So if I'm coming into a time of being active, I want to have more carbohydrates because I do feel better when I have more carbohydrates. When I'm inactive, I want to have more fats in those meals. So that way I have a sustainable amount of energy, but it's more so it fills me up so I can go longer gaps between meals. And that helps me keep my calories lower. So that's an example where maybe the average person might eat, say, 12 foods. 12 different food items on a pretty regular basis. But if you actually look at what they do every week, there is a 13th, 14th, 15th random type of food that fits in there every now and then. And what's more so variable than what they eat is when they eat. Sometimes they have breakfast, sometimes they don't. Sometimes for breakfast, they'll have Greek yogurt and an apple. The next day, they ran out of apples, so they don't have the apple. Then they have common foods that they'll have for lunch, but one lunch might be 800 calories, whereas the next lunch might be only 400 calories, but they don't know that. And then it's like, well, which lunch did you have, and how many of the 800 did you have this week versus the 400 of the last week? And there ends up being a lot more inconsistency in the meaningful outcome of what they're eating, in the sense of we would track what we're eating to have a better control, better idea of our total calories, and then we would also want to know our protein as well. And this is that way we can maintain the energy we need. If somebody's wanting to lose body fat, they want to be in an appropriate deficit, not too extreme of a deficit, or at least to make sure they're in a deficit at all. And then if somebody's eating for performance or muscle growth, strength improvement, whatever that might be, they need to be at maintenance or in a surplus, and then ensuring that they have enough protein. So we would track our food to make sure that we are properly fueling the adaptations that we want with our body changes. Whether that's body change like outside of performance or lifting weights, maybe you're just dieting right now and going for walks, and that's your fat loss program, so you don't even really lift weights, that's fine. Not recommended, but that's fine. So whatever the reason might be, for what you want to have a body change, whether that's trying to lose weight, gain weight, build muscle, gain strength, recomp, whatever it might be, there's going to be some degree of control over your food that you're going to want to have. So that way you can manipulate your food to progress your goals. Over time, you're going to need to eat in a progressive manner if you want the outcome of what you're doing to continue to progress. I think I got through all that. And what we're looking for is to have some level of consistency, so that way we have predictability in what we're doing. Based on then the outcome we're seeing, we can change what we do. When people don't track what they do, I've found that there's a lot of reasons, but two main reasons is it's either self-protection or self-destruction that is masked as self-protection. And what I mean by this is often people don't want to know really how poorly they are doing at something. So if they are trying to track calories and eat in a quote-unquote healthy way, they have the pressure of thinking of those choices, the pressure of wanting that goal, that outcome all day, every day. Now, they might get busy and kind of forget about it for a couple hours while they're doing something important at work. But there is this pressure of, okay, well, I'm dieting, so therefore I want to see the outcome of a diet. And then every decision they're making based around food or activity is going to be focused around that lens of I am dieting. And now, same thing for any other goal it might be. Self-protection comes into play whenever they're wanting the outcome, but they don't really want to know how well they're doing. Because what if they're not doing well? What if they aren't consistent with their calories? Who's to blame? It's only them. It becomes self-protection because if we don't fully know exactly what we're doing, we can then often blame anything and anyone else. Oh, I'm not losing weight because my body it doesn't respond well to low-carb diets. Well, are you tracking your calories? Are you tracking your carbohydrates? Do you know exactly how many calories and carbohydrates you're having? Just because you've said no to a few carb foods doesn't mean you're quote-unquote in a low-carb diet, and it certainly doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually in a caloric deficit. This is often the case when people will cut out complete food groups. They'll, maybe say, I'm not going to have any starchy carbs. There's a ton of examples of this where somebody might say, okay, I'm going to cut out all carbohydrates except for vegetables and fruit. And vegetables might be, things that are like 100 calories or less for like a cup, a cup's volume worth. So like the truly low calorie vegetables. So not like beans, which are technically, I don't know, that's like a legume. Well, anyhow, so they're going to do low calorie vegetables, fruits, and then they're going to allow themselves proteins and fats. And they're going to think, well, I'm cutting out the major carbohydrates. I'm definitely in a caloric deficit. That is not the case. Not always. Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I can have bacon for breakfast because that's not a carbohydrate. I can have, something else for, lunch or dinner. And they start choosing higher fat content foods. And fat is twice the calories per volume as carbohydrates. So often they won't feel that they're eating more in volume. However, they actually are eating more in total calories if they equated that volume to carbohydrates. So sometimes they'll just be cutting out something saying, oh, I don't eat, this food or this food, and that's going to put me in a deficit. But for some reason, this diet just isn't working. My body doesn't work for that, and whatever it might be. They blame the diet, they blame their body. But if they actually tracked their calories, they would see, oh, wow, I replaced the carbohydrates with high fat content foods. I'm actually not in a calorie deficit. Therefore, I'm not making progress. Therefore, it's my poor choices and my lack of tracking that are causing the problems. People don't want to be the problem. So they self-deceive for self-protection even when they don't know they're doing it. And that's actually the most often case. So I had a client recently who they had a calorie goal for a section of their day. And let's just say their goal was 700 to 1,000 calories. If they're just anywhere in there, they're doing well. Well, some days they were at like 650. The next days, maybe they were at 1,050. Another day, 650. And it's like, well, we have these two food choices that you're commonly picking. Maybe they're more often picking the 650. And it's like, well, if our range is 700 to 1,000, and we're being consistent at 650, why aren't we making that adjustment to be consistent at 700 since that's the minimum? The minimum range is 700 to 1,000. Why aren't we making that adjustment to be consistent within the range? We've been consistent outside of the range. You've been consistent at 650. Why can't you just bump up the portion of this or this or this, get to the 700 and be consistent there? So I asked them, I was like, is this intentional? Do you think being lower in calories is going to help you with fat loss? If so, that's fine. I understand that mindset. And then let's talk about maybe why I set the target at 700, 1,000, not 650. But I would like to talk that out. I'd like to know why. And their answer I've been calculating everything and it just came out to 650. But when I write it down on paper and I track my macros, it ends up being over 700. So then I had to explain that not all carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram, not all proteins are 4 calories per gram, not all fats are 9 calories per gram, but the app that we were using to track things knew that. The app we were using to track things actually knew, okay, if this protein is 4.2 calories per gram, or if this carbohydrate is 3.6 calories per gram instead of 4. The app would micro adjust, and that's why it came out to only be 650. Whereas the client was tracking their macros and they were getting an equivalent to what they thought was 700 calories. So I asked them, I said, well, why did you start tracking macros? We weren't doing that. We were just tracking our calories via the app. If you try to track macros and then calculate out the calories, that's extra work and it's unnecessary. We don't need to predetermine the number of carbohydrates we have. We don't need to predetermine the number of fats we have. We don't even need to be tracking carbs and fats at all if we don't want to. We can time when we have more carbs versus more fats for what we want, performance or feel or satiety or whatever, but we don't actually need to be tracking the grams of those. You're doing more work and it's actually less accurate. They were surprised to know that, like to learn that, and it turned out that they had done diets in the past that had more control mechanisms than the diet I'm having them do. And they believed that those greater control mechanisms were going to help them be more successful. To which then I had to point out, well, you're working with me because those diets didn't work in the past. You had to have more attention on more things, and that gave you a false sense of control. But clearly they didn't work. None of those diets worked in the past. I'm giving you something that does work and you have less to track, so it's actually less work to do. We're just cutting out all the meaningless work and we're getting down to the most optimal things that we need to track, and everything else kind of either doesn't matter or doesn't matter yet. They thought by being more immersed in data that they were going to have more control and therefore they were going to produce a better outcome. But what they were tracking isn't related to the outcome that they want. It was tracking more things, yes, but it wasn't things that mattered. And by them changing their focus to having a false sense of control, they actually lost control of what mattered most. So their self-deception was, the more I track, the more control I have. But that wasn't true. Now, I've danced around a lot and I'm trying to give different examples of things. And I just really want to raise awareness to the importance of tracking what we do and being honest with ourselves. That's why I ask myself that question, am I full of shit all the time? Because I don't want to have in me what I see often with clients, where they have blind spots. If you were to ask them, are they doing XYZ? They would say, hell yeah, they would pass the lie detector test. But whenever I'm looking at their data, when I'm looking at the consistency, say over the last 28 days, last 4 weeks, and their adherence is only, say, 70%. But if you ask them, I'll say, hey, have you been tracking everything? You can see the same numbers I can see. And in our journal, I write it down every single week where all the numbers are. So I show you how I track it. Are you tracking this too? And if so, do you see where we're at? Where do you think your adherence is? And they're like, oh, I'm following everything. I'm following the plan. I'm like, okay, 70% of the time, yes. It's like, what's that Ron Burgundy thing? It works 60% of the time, it works all the time, that kind of thing. And that's what I'm seeing in clients often is they might only be 50 to 70% adherent, but if you ask them, they would say oh, I'm following the diet. It's like, no, the diet isn't written in a sense to where you're going to get the results you want by only following it 50 to 70% of the time. And that's something where I see people do, and I want to make sure I don't do that. So I track my calories in MyFitnessPal, actually. I track them every single day, and I do track my protein. I have a minimum of protein that I like to hit, but I also allow myself to push for more if I'm feeling a little behind in recovery. I can sometimes swap out some carbs for protein and push some more recovery, but then I feel like if I'm a little lethargic or tired, or I start to have a feeling of like, ugh, I don't really feel like working out today, then I know I'm probably too low in carbs, so I bring the protein down, push the carbs more, and then all of a sudden I'm more excited to train and have better energy. So I track all this stuff myself, and I track it with my food, I track it with my training, I track the number of sets I do per body part per week, I track, loosely track like volume in regards to like the weight loads I use. And the reason why I say loosely is sometimes that's going to be variable. You know, if my wife and I are traveling, if I have longer days, more stressful days, I might not come into a workout 100% of what I was the last time I did that body part. So if I'm coming in a little more beat up, a little more tired, and I know, okay, maybe last time on this exercise I did 100 pounds, I'm at 80 today and it feels freaking hard as hell, I might just bump up to like 90, give that a good go, and then just call that for the day. I'm not going to force 100 if it feels like it might risk injury. And what's nice is my body's perception of how hard that 90 feels was as much, if not worse, than how hard that 100 felt the previous workout. So my perception, which is the driver of progress, is still going to be maximal, which does get me the progress that I want. Now I can't, make a 10-pound weight feel as miserable as 100 pounds and think I'm going to get the same level of progress. There is a weight load similarity, like the weights have to be close to each other, because otherwise the tensile strength, like the weight load strength pulling through the muscles, that stretch tension is going to be too far different. Whereas if it's close enough, and you're going to get good results anyhow. So I track a lot of what I do. If I try to do things with finances, if I try to do things with relationships, like when Meredith and I first met, we both had read the book, The 5 Love Languages, and another book called Love and Respect. And those were two big books. We actually bonded over books. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I don't read as much, but I do listen to a lot of audiobooks. She also likes to read and listen to books. And when we were going on dates, we would often talk about the book that we were reading that week and what we were learning from that, what we were seeing in our life that maybe we're learning from the book on how to evaluate and change. The two categories I read are self-help and business. That's pretty much it. I have read some finance stuff from time to time, but that one isn't as fun because I'm not getting, playing around in the stock market all the time or doing things like that. I know finances well enough for where I am in life, but always want to learn more. But most often things I'm reading are business and self-help. So we were always talking about that, and it was very fun, very, very unique way to date and relate. Now, if I'm wanting to get better in a relationship, one of the things I said is we had talked through the 5 love languages. We discussed what our love languages were. And for Meredith, one of her love languages is words of affirmation. So then I started to track, okay, well, how often per week am I sharing words of affirmation? And I want to make sure that I'm doing that often, see what her vibe is, what she's feeling at the frequency I'm doing it. I obviously don't want to love bomb her and do it way too much to where then it starts to lose its meaning. So I want to make sure that I'm doing it so that way she feels that love, but it's also not so frequent that it loses the meaningfulness. But that's something I would track. I did track. So not only is it nutrition-based stuff, but anything I want to be good at in life, I do want to track what I'm doing, and then I can see what the outcome is and then modify what I'm doing to get a better outcome. It just makes sense. We would do that with anything in life that we want to get better at. If we track our efforts towards it, we see the results of those efforts. If I want more or less or a difference in the results, I got to do more or less or a difference in my efforts. That's how we avoid self-deception. That's how we avoid being full of shit, is we track what we do. The downside of tracking what you do is you will find that overwhelmingly, most often, you are the problem. Without a doubt, you're the problem. You're the one screwing things up. There are things that are maybe getting in your way that are external of you. There are things that are influencing what you can or can't do. However, those things are outside of your control. If you still want the outcome you want, you have to find a way to do what you need to do in spite of those things. Anything that's outside of my control can take away from my results. It's then my responsibility, my choice, it's my actions that will allow or disallow that to happen. So I've got to find another way to get it done. But that's entirely up to me. If I just sit there and say, oh, like one of my clients, for example, the power was out in his gym the last, I think, 2 days. And therefore, he had to go to a different gym. The different gym didn't have some of the equipment that he wanted. So, for example, we had some cardio components that he was supposed to do. And he's like, well, they don't have any cardio machines. So I just went outside for a run. And I tried to make it feel as miserable as the cardio normally does. Freaking love it. Awesome. Well done. He found a way to still get it done. As opposed to the person who might send a message and said, oh, the gym was out of power, so I just took the weekend off. No. Please don't do that. If you need to mentally, emotionally, physically recover, that's a whole different thing. But if the gym just didn't have power and you were supposed to work out, find something else to do. And that would be the key. And that's how we avoid those self-deception things. That's how we avoid being full of shit to where, okay, this situation came up. I had a million things I could have done, but I didn't do any of them. So I'm just going to accept not getting closer to my goal that weekend or that day or whatever that action of time was. And that's the big thing, is just taking ownership of if I do track things, I'm going to find out that I'm most likely the problem. I then have to accept that I need to work on me, and I need to continue to find ways to get things done. That does require effort. That requires just making things work. It requires you asking yourself, do I really want the outcome or not? I remember back in 2020, how fun 2020 was for everybody. One of the workouts I did was Meredith and I were getting 5-gallon water jugs delivered to the house for a water dispenser that she kept in her office. And the one day I couldn't get to the gym, and I was like, I'm just going to go outside and work out. And she's like, okay. And of course, she's supportive. So I went out, I grabbed 2 of the 5-gallon water jugs. I did water jug swings. I did some kind of cleans and presses, and just carry them, tried to front rack carry them, which was an awful idea. It killed my shoulders. And tried to do a bunch of other things with them. And I just putzed around, did some stuff for about 30 minutes. Was it the best workout ever? Hell no. But did it make me feel proud of myself? Absolutely. Felt awesome. I ended up getting a little video clip of it where our old cat, Freddie, ended up photobombing me in the video. And since then, Freddie has passed away, but that video is now one of my favorite things to watch back, to see Freddie and just remember how supportive Freddie was and how fun Freddie was to have around. If I wouldn't have done that workout and I missed one workout towards my goal of being, better physically, would that really have mattered? Probably not. It wouldn't have mattered for me in regards to ruining consistency or my discipline overall. I was still going to work out the next day. But it ended up being a really cool moment where I got to have Freddie in a video that I now get to keep forever. And that was a big thing for me. That was really cool. So I'm very happy that I got that workout in, not only for progressing my own self, but also because now I got Freddie in a video. But those are just moments where we have to decide, am I going to take control? Am I still going to get things done? And to know what we need to get done and to know whether or not we're doing it, we do need to track it. So I would encourage you, if you want to avoid being full of shit, if you want to avoid self-deception becoming self-destruction, is to track what you do. Track what matters most towards your goals, and be honest with yourself when you track. So if you're supposed to weigh food, don't just say, this is roughly 100 grams, or it looks to be about a cup. No, measure the stuff. If you're going to track it all the way. Don't just estimate and then track your estimations and then be like, I'm tracking everything. Bullshit. You're writing stuff down. Tracking is what you're doing, you're making sure is accurate. If you're just writing stuff down, but you're not making sure it's accurate, that's not tracking. That, again, is a form of self-deception. That, again, is you being full of shit. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to be honest with ourselves as much as we can, even when that hurts. Because if we get through the hurt, if we work to address the reason why we're avoiding doing it, and then we start to do it a little bit by a little bit, and then hopefully by a lot, we will eventually get closer and closer to the outcome that we want. We will eventually reach our results, or the best possible outcome that could have been possible. That's the only way to get there, is to find out where you're full of shit, and then just confront it, work on it, and develop that over time. So I do encourage you, if you want to avoid self-destruction, if you want to avoid self-destruction, but avoid self-deception becoming self-destruction, is to track everything you're doing. If you're not sure what to track, you can always reach out. If you've listened this far into the podcast, I appreciate you very much, and I hope you get everything you need from the podcast. So please reach out. Our website is c3method.com, www.c3, and the 3 is spelled out, so it's CTHREE method.com. Reach out, let me know what you're working on. I'll help you come up with some markers to track, and then that way you'll know exactly what to track, what's optimal and what's going to get you the best outcome, but with the least amount of work involved. So if you have any questions, just let us know. I appreciate you very much. Hopefully this was just good food for thought. Raise your awareness to any blind spots you might have, and the need to address self-deception even when it hurts. Okay? If you need anything, let me know. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.